The right wing in Sweden has unfortunately taken the lead in Sweden's national elections. In fact, with 95% of the vote counted, the right wing Sweden Democrats seem to have a one vote majority. Now, any labels, political labels you think of here in the United States, forget everything you know about them, because in Sweden, the Swedish, or Sweden Democrats, I should say, is a right wing anti-immigration party that has run on a tough on crime platform. And I'll give you more details on that in just a moment. But again, this is a party that didn't seem to have much support. In fact, a few years ago, it won about 17% of the vote. And now that number has gone up to over 20% of the vote. Okay, so let's give you the details on what happened. Now, the full preliminary result will not be due until Wednesday, because there's still some mail-in ballots that are being counted, and there's still about 5% of the vote that has to be tallied. However, it is very likely that the prime minister will be a moderate by the name of Ulf Kristersson. And this is going to make the situation very complicated in Sweden, especially when you consider the fact that you're going to have this moderate leader trying to form a coalition government with the right wing that appears to be in the majority right now. Now, the right wing was able to increase its popularity due to sentiment toward immigration and crime, something that I actually wasn't aware of until fairly recently. Sweden's been grappling with gang violence, gun violence, and that fear within various communities in Sweden has pushed voters to move closer to a right-wing, perspective. And this next video will explain that in a little more detail.
The Sweden Democrats, a party with neo-Nazi roots, is riding the wave of fear over gun violence.
The country is split, and it's very important that we get organized and come together.
It's important about not getting the far right into the system.
I don't like the way that people can't really talk and listen to each other anymore, but everything is getting polarized.
But for supporters of Jimmy Åkesson and the Sweden Democrats, the time for talking is over. The country has one of the worst gun violence records in Europe, with 335 shootings last year. According to a 2017 report, 9 out of 10 shootings in Sweden were committed by first or second generation immigrants.
Today, no one can go out without fear. We know it's because other culture come into our country.
We need a new government.
It has irresponsible immigration policies.
So a few other things that I want to mention, because I think a lot of people tend to take what's happening within their own country and think that it's the same situation in other countries. So, for instance, in the United States, while the right wing attempts to paint immigrants as criminals, as the individuals who are leading to an uptick in crime in this country, the evidence does not bear that out. There have been multiple studies looking into that, and it shows that immigrant neighborhoods tend to actually have lower crime than neighborhoods that mostly consist of U.S. citizens. Now, in Sweden, though, it does appear that the prevalence of crime gets tied to the immigrant communities, but it's not because immigrants are by their very nature violent people. There's been a lot of criticism about the Swedish government's inability to assimilate individuals, educate individuals, give them opportunities and a future. And so that's the criticism from, more left-wing individuals in Sweden. However, the right wing is just saying, no, we need to end immigration. They don't want any more refugees from Africa, for instance, coming in. And let me just note that refugees from Africa are mostly coming into Sweden as a result of the unlivable conditions due to climate-related, natural disasters and things like that. And they also have been taking in refugees from Ukraine as well, but they want to, the right wing at least, they want to stop the flow of immigration, and they want to focus on assimilating the refugees and immigrants who are within the country already. That's a lot to get into, Cenk. Before I give you more details, why don't you jump in? Tell me what you think.
Yeah. Look, this is a little bit of bittersweet news. There's no way we're going to do a Sweden story without me doing a dad joke. It's just not possible. I just wanted to get it out of the way. Okay. Now, having said that, there's going to be lots of twists and turns in this story. It's not as simple as you might imagine. Okay. So first of all, let me just go over what Anna said, but I give it a little bit more color. So because it's hard to keep up if you're not familiar with another country's, parties. So the Social Democrats are the left.
Yes.
The moderates are the conservatives. The Sweden Democrats are the really conservatives. So Social Democrats left, Swedish Democrats far right. Okay, so that obviously doesn't make any sense, but we're moving forward. Okay, it doesn't have to make sense. It's not your country, it's their country. So that's just how it developed. Okay, so don't get confused by the labels. So now number two. Their politics is not necessarily the same as our politics in terms of right wing and left wing. So some of their right wing positions are right wing, just like you would have here in America. But there are two positions that they have that are very popular among the Swedish Democrats that are the far right. Okay. One is they're against guns. Now, here in America, our right wing is in favor of guns, but their right wing associates it with violence. Why? Because apparently they're not insane. They can make an easy logical connection. They're like, the guns are the thing that kills people. We don't want people killed. We're against crime, violence, and hence, obviously, guns. So they're more anti-gun than the rest of the parties. And then number two is, I'm going to give you a quote here from Reuters. With the Sweden Democrats opposed to his flagship policy, referring to the other side, of benefit cuts.
Yeah.
The far right is opposed to benefit cuts, Anna. And
right.
So, because why? Because they're populist. But unlike in America, where the right wing uses it as fake populism and wants to cut benefits for average Americans, in Sweden, because they're not taken over by corporate politics, they still have a right wing strand, but that right wing is actually populist and hence is in favor of the benefits that the government gives.
Yeah, I mean, what they want, the similarity between right-wing populists in Sweden and right-wing populists here in the United States is that they are nationalists. Like, they want to close the country down. They want to stop the flow of immigration, including legal immigration. They don't want to accept any refugees. However, they certainly have a populist message when it comes to economic matters. So they do not want to cut funding on social programs or social spending. The other thing that they want to do is just mostly focus on assimilating people, right? And assimilation is a tricky word because I've always had kind of a negative reaction to it, but what I'm gathering from, honestly, the majority of voters in Sweden is that they want to take people who have already immigrated there, refugees who have already come, and basically create a society in which they fit in, right? Where they understand the laws, they get an education. These are things that they want to focus on, which is also a little different from what you would expect from the right wing here in the United States. But again, that nationalist message certainly is still there, and it is shared between right wingers in the United States and in Sweden. So yeah, there's that. The other thing I wanted to just quickly mention is this is unlikely to do. Let's say the right wing is officially the majority. They've counted all the votes. They're officially the majority. It is unlikely to have any impact on whether or not Sweden joins NATO. They're making moves to join NATO given the Russian invasion into Ukraine, and that's likely to still happen even with a right-wing majority in government in Sweden.
Yeah. I just say add one thing on assimilation, because I'm an immigrant and I came into the country when I was 8 years old. And the answer is, of course, balance. It's always balance, but neither side ever gets the balance, right? So what does balance mean? One, I think that you're better off, especially if you're a kid under the age of 12, doing immersive learning in the English language. And so a lot of people disagree with that, and then they'll even get angry at me. But I lived it, and I know that for me, and probably for a lot of kids, immersive learning is better. So just—
What do you mean? What do you mean by immersive learning?
So they didn't accommodate me and teach the classes in Turkish as well. mean, it would have been, I think, absurd. I mean, how are you going to find a Turkish teacher in the middle of East Brunswick, New Jersey? And sometimes our side says, no, you have to find one that knows Tagalog and Turkish and Urdu and, and I'm being extreme, right? But certainly Spanish is one that is taught. And this is a very normal left-wing position. We should teach Spanish and English at the same time for immigrants so they can assimilate. They think that will lead to better assimilation. I don't think so. I think learning English is by being immersive and just going to the English classes is the better way to go. But by the way, my school provided a teacher for me, a Vietnamese kid and a Korean kid. So, they would show pictures of a cat and say cat, and that's how we learn English. Right. And so I just give that as a small example. There's 1,000 ways to assimilate without losing your cultural identity.
Right. Yeah. No, I like that you mentioned that because for the longest time, and still today, when I hear the word assimilation, especially considering the political party that tends to use that word here in the United States, what they do refer to is essentially just shedding your cultural identity. And I disagree with that. I think that culture is a wonderful thing. I think it enriches a country as diverse as the United States. But if we're talking about assimilation in regard to learning the language, learning what the cultural norms are, right? What the what laws are in this new country that you're living in, obviously, you need that for a country to have like a sound identity, if that makes any sense, without forcing people to shed what their culture is.
Yeah, and last thing I'll say on that is, look, in Europe, probably the best cultural export in European history is doner kebab. And I don't know many Europeans who would disagree. So that's a Turkish version of a gyro. It's super popular all over Europe, especially in the northern European countries. So nobody's going to argue against that kind of cultural assimilation. But
the number of times you've brought up doner kebab on this show, usually in a similar context, is amazing. Like, it's the first thing your head goes to, doner kebab. Let's mention the doner kebab.
Look at me, are you surprised? Okay, but seriously, look, on the other hand, a lot of old school cultures, definitely not just Turkey, but yes, sometimes Turkey. Not here in America, because mainly a higher socioeconomic group wind up coming here, doctors, engineers, just because the vagaries of immigration law. But in Germany, it's honestly Turks that are poorer and needed a job and drove to Germany. And so they're from the old school and they would beat their kids. And it's okay for a country to say, no, we don't do that here. Mm-hmm. And you have to follow our laws. And so to me, saying, I got a cultural defense, we beat him at home, so I can beat him here. No, you have to follow the laws of the country that you're in, okay?
Yeah.
At the same time, killing off your entire culture makes no sense at all. It'll enrich the country that you're in now. So for God's sake, balance.
Well, let's move on to... All right, I'm going to drop it. All right, I can't help it. I'm going to say one more thing. You guys understand, right, what the prevalence of violent crime does to a voter's state of mind, especially when these elections come up. Just something to keep in mind as huge portions of the left continue to completely minimize the reality of violent crime in America. It puts us at a disadvantage if we pretend like it's not happening. We have to address it, and we have to address it in a robust way that ensures that we direct the country in the area, in the place that we want it to go when it comes to criminal justice reform. Otherwise, if all citizens get from the left is messaging that minimizes the reality and no real solutions, well, then they're going to look to the right wing, which I don't want, when it comes to no criminal justice reform and essentially allowing that pendulum to swing right back to the tough on crime, mass incarceration policies. We need to avoid that. So I think that what happened in Sweden is foreshadowing, but I'm sure I'll get a lot of hate for even saying that. I know.
No, I'll go further. First, back to the doner kebabs. No, I'm kidding. All right. So listen, guys, Ilhan Omar nearly lost an election in a very blue district in Minnesota because she was for defund the police. You can say, oh, I'm mad at you for saying that. Oh, facts suck. Okay. But that's just a stone cold fact. So, and here, the left in Sweden maybe the most progressive country in the world, certainly among the most progressive in the world, and no one would doubt that, is about to lose to a party that was formerly neo-Nazi because of uprising and violence. And it's not complicated as to why, because voters vote based on what is closest to them. And physical threat to their safety is the closest thing in the world. That is a thing they really, really want to avoid. If you keep poking the bear, at some point they're going to go right wing. And then, of course, there's going to be an overreaction and they're going to do dumbass things like mass incarceration for jaywalking and marijuana and dumbass things. So we're trying to head that off at the pass by saying, let's do logical reform, logical criminal justice reform and police reform and judicial reform, so we don't go to these extremes by enabling the right wing by pretending that that problem doesn't exist.